And are you refreshed? Good. We've beat up on you enough today? We'll be brief.
Yeah. Is it wrong then maybe to try and define evil and just maybe accept things just as life?
Well, we are happy to define evil for you. Evil is the absence of the well-being that is natural.
It's something physically that exists.
It
Is it so entwined like yin and yang that the white and the dark and they just exist?
Well, you even could put it in that light. In every particle of everything is that which is wanted and lack of it. So if you are in vibrational harmony with well-being, then well-being is your experience. If you are not in vibrational harmony with well-being, then the absence of well-being is translated as evil. The distinction that we really want to make is that there is a source of well-being which you are allowing or you are not. So if you are allowing the well-being that you would call physical wellness, then you say, I'm healthy. I've tapped into the source of wellness. But if you find yourself sick, often you say, I've tapped into the source of sickness. And we say, but there is no such source of sickness. All you've done is found vibrational resistance to the well-being that would be there. And in the disallowing of well-being, you are experiencing the absence of well-being. But then people say, oh, Abraham, it feels so much more than that. It feels like there are actual congealed pockets of sickness or evil that lurk. And we say, well, what happens is that every thought that has ever been thought still exists. And law of attraction manages the thoughts. So if there are, over the years of human experience, if there are many fearful thoughts or thoughts of pushing against, of course those thoughts continue to exist and law of attraction gathers them together. And so it is possible for a physical human to get so fixated on something that they do not want that they could maintain vibrational harmony with what they do not want and tap into that greater stream, so to speak, that has been the result of many who have pushed against. But there is not a source of evil that flows into your environment like the source that comes forth from that which you call God or that which you call good. It does not exist. We understand how man comes to that erroneous or incorrect conclusion because everyone wants to feel good. They want to be good. They want to live that which is good. And so as they don't understand the guidance system that is born within them, and they are looking at the results or the manifestations of the... Let's start in another place. So many people are not consciously connecting with source and then flowing energy from that vantage point. Instead, they are sort of approaching life in a backwards fashion where they are looking at the results of how themselves and others have flowed energy. So they look at manifestations and they say, those are good ones and those are bad ones. And I want more of those, but I don't want those. I shall not do that, and I shall not do that, and I shall not do that. I don't want that, I don't want that, I don't want that. Not realizing that in every moment that they're talking about what they don't want, they're including it in their vibration. So the more they talk about what they don't want, the more they achieve vibrational harmony with what they don't want, and the more they disallow what they do want. And after that happens to you, you have to conclude, I have a good heart, my intentions are good, I want to be good, I'm trying real hard, why is this bad stuff happening to me? It's illogical, they say. And then they conclude, it must be because there is something that I don't understand. There must be some evil source that is lurking, and I have not been vigilant enough to keep the evil thing away from me. And we say, it is not some evil source. It is that in your worry about these things you do not want, you've activated so many vibrations that are in discord with the well-being that would be there otherwise, that you've disallowed the well-being. But when it manifests, we know it feels very much like it has happened to you. The last moment in time that a person wants to be told you are the creator of your own reality is when you're living something horrible. It is much softer to believe that it happened by some germ or it happened by some other source. We don't think it would be very settling to think that it happened to you because some evil was asserted into your experience, and it is totally illogical in the universe as we know it to be. But people will go to great extents to justify where they stand. And our message is to help you to realize that as you stand in justification of where you stand, this happened to me because of this, this happened to me because of this, this happened to me because of this. You just keep that vibration alive until generation after generation begins to conclude as they read and look at historical documents, well, this is just the way that it is. And we're wanting you to understand it is not the way it needs to be. And anyone who connects with source energy lives otherwise. It's lovely. Law of attraction is a lovely thing because there is no evidence to the contrary of it. And when you get a handle on, when you are able to make the conscious correlation between what you're thinking and feeling and what you're getting, then never again are you confused that there is some other arbitrary asserter of anything into your experience.
Does death really matter? Because it happens in so many different ways. I mean, is life really...
Well, from our perspective, there is no death, because you never cease to exist and you never cease to hold consciousness and you never for a moment cease knowing who you are. And so the death experience is more a change of focus than anything else.
Excuse me. Because I think, like, if I'm driving my car on a dark night, rainy night, and I come up and someone's in the road and I hit them and I kill them, you know, I kind of feel like I can live with that death because, it's still a death. It's important in someone's life. But, I didn't mean to do it. It was dark. I didn't see him, and, I hit him. So in my mind, I can say, well, I didn't mean it. And you can kind of move on from it, as opposed to maybe shooting him or, beating him up.
Well, you get into a lot of trouble as humans as you try to, from the outside in, decide which acts are good and which acts are gooder and which acts are bad and which acts are badder. In other words, it's an interesting thing. Every now and again, Esther will feel upheaval within herself as she sees someone who has murdered someone having a 25-year sentence and someone who has used a drug being in jail for life. And she will say, there is something really screwy about the arbitrary way that we are passing judgment. And humans have had a hard time deciding what they think God thinks. We're getting a little ringing. Humans have had a hard time for a long time deciding or figuring out or coming into any agreement about what they think that broader perspective thinks about all of that. But we can tell you what we know to be, and that is that there is not death, and that anything that you are living has come to you in response to your vibrational offering. So here is the easy way for you to hear this. When Jerry first began visiting with us, he was not so different from you. He had a lot of questions that he'd been carrying around for a long time that he was wanting to sort out. And we were not as easy on him as we've been on you here today. In that the majority of the answers that we gave him in those early days were, this is not your work. This is not your work. Well, this is not your work. Well, this is not your work. And finally, after he'd endured that answer for a few thousand times, he exclaimed, what is my work? And we said, we thought you'd never ask. He had an idea that justice would be better served if there were islands of punishment where all of the rapers went to one island and did it to each other, and all of the murderers went to an island and did it to each other. And all of the burglars went to an island and burgled each other. He thought that that would be justice. And we said to him, you already have these islands. They are vibrational islands. And as we explained it to him and the small group that had gathered to discuss the topic, many were unhappy with our answer. They said, Abraham, how is it that the person who is murdered ends up on the same island with the person who murders? And we say, because they are coming into harmony with the vibration. When you look at something you do not want and you shout, no, I want not that, and you think about it and you feel fear around it until you have actually activated in your vibration, you are the candidate for the murder. In other words, the one who fears something the most is the one who has it most activated in their vibration. And it is logical that they would experience it. And without knowing it, they have been defying their guidance system. Their guidance system has been saying, this stove is hot. And they've been saying, well, I know the stove is hot, and I know that this is painful, and I've been feeling this emotion called worry or fear or hatred or anger, and it never felt good while I was feeling it, but just the same, I've learned that these thoughts are good thoughts as I read the books that say, think these thoughts and disregard the way you feel. And so I'm just going to leave my hand on the stove and just see what happens. And what I would really ask is that all of the physics of this time-space reality and all of the laws of the universe yield and let me be the one exception, that I can put my hand on a hot stove and it will not burn my hand. And in time, they conclude that that did not work out very well. If the stove is hot and they put their hand on the stove and they do not pay attention to their guidance system, then eventually they receive the detrimental effect of having their hand on a hot stove. And that's exactly what happens to someone who is murdered or someone who dies in a traffic accident, or eventually they experience the effect of having not listened to their guidance system. Now, it's not fair for us to imply that everyone who dies is not listen to their guidance system, because in some ways we're falling into the same incorrect thought that man has, that death is a bad thing. You have put death and death penalty in the same sentence for so long that you conclude that death is a bad thing, when death is just like walking out of this room into another. Death is the next logical step. It is the changing of consciousness. It is the regaining of the full awareness, you see. But we have to say to you that if you run over someone in your car, that you have created it. You have co-created it with the one who got run over. Now, the further implication of your question is there some sort of judgment about it? In other words, how bad was that really? And what we are wanting you to understand, it was a co-creative moment. And in the greater scheme of things, it was not different than any other co-creative moment. But from your physical standpoint, you want to decide, well, which things are the baddest? And we want you to understand that you are creators, and from our perspective, always doing the best that you know to do in any moment. And the death experience is always suicide, always, every time, because every death experience is created by self. No matter how it plays out, every single one of them is created by self. And so
there's really no wrong path.
You can't get it wrong because you never get it done. And no matter what you have lived, where you stand, you now have the perspective from which you stand. And this powerful perspective with this desire that's been stirred by what you've been living has huge calling of source energy qualities. And so as you stand in this newly discovered asking with energy pouring through you in a more powerful way than ever before, and you have practiced in easier times, relaxing and allow the energy to flow, things always work out for you. And sometimes the way they work out for you is in the death experience. In other words, sometimes people get so resistant about allowing well-being to flow that the death experience is the way that they release all of the resistance. And that happens every time. In the death experience, there is the releasing of all resistance. But it is so lovely when you are physically focused and you are able to, in your physical body, release resistance and allow that source energy here in this time-space reality. Some will have to croak to taste the sweetness of it. But what we are teaching, art of allowing, is tasting the sweetness of it before you croak. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.